Welcome to Recogs, the inventory success podcast where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and sell their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at Manufactured. Manufactured is the inventory success platform for consumer and B2B companies. What do we mean when we say inventory success? Well, we help SMBs manufacture, finance, and distribute their products across 20 categories. If you're looking for help to reduce your COGS, or you're looking for inventory financing help or selling to new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at manufactured.com. Now, this is a free podcast, but that doesn't mean we don't have a favor. If you're enjoying the show, if you can please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening so you don't miss out when the next episode is, that would be amazing. And if you can also leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app, that would also mean a lot. We also not only produce content that hopefully is helpful to SMBs and business owners, but we also throw events that help foster community around the US and Canada. Subscribe to be in the know when we're next throwing an event. Click in the show notes. It's manufactured.com/events. Our guest today is Jacob Guss, who is the founder CEO of Bold Move Beverage. Bold Move Beverage is an RTD product that's American whiskey blended with premium cold brew coffee. We discussed why he decided to make a drink that was coffee and whiskey. Also, why he chose American whiskey, bourbon, as opposed to Scotch or Irish. The alcohol industry, how it's constructed with a three-tiered system, and how he got into a distributor, and as well, of course, into retail. When he realized that there was a pull from retailers and that the product was actually selling through, what is the exact use case that he focused on for his customer? Is it morning? Is it afternoon? Is it evening to actually enjoy Bold Move? And as well as his expansion plans, which he has a lot coming, including launching a new SKU. Without further ado, here's Jacob. Jacob, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. How are you?
Doing great. Excited to be chatting with you, especially on a Friday. This is tremendous. How did you think about coffee meets alcohol? And what was the inspiration behind Bold Move Beverage?
It's a great question. So my first job was at a college. I really fell in love with coffee in that it not only tasted great and was like a fun thing to do with my coworkers, but it was also a time to be present and kind of take a break and build kind of personal connections with my colleagues. And a lot of those relationships became great friendships that I would watch football games with on the weekend, play golf with them. And I always found myself, loving the fact that coffee brought people together, but also appreciating, social drinking with my friends on the weekend and kind of also building that friendship side of the equation as well. So when I was at brunches, when I was golfing, I found myself always wanting coffee and always wanting to, have, a couple of drinks with my friends and kind of let loose on the weekend. So seeing the growth of espresso martinis and Irish coffees and canned cocktails, I thought that there was a business there, and I started exploring it, started brewing coffee, started blending in some whiskeys and vanilla extracts and creamers, and getting hearing what people thought, handing mason jars out to friends and friends of friends, and it kind of just morphed into a business.
That's amazing. Is it? And I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about the rise of the espresso martini and how popular that drink has become. Because of course you get the shot of the espresso, and then of course as well as alcohol as well, obviously in your system with the martini. So how did you think about then? What was, I guess you started brewing these and mixing coffee and alcohol. Can you talk a little bit about how you went around experimenting with these two, different ingredients, and also which was kind of how you kind of landed on the right base?
Yeah, so I was living in LA at the time when I first had the idea. I was working full time at a company, Princess Cruises, and I went to Sprouts and I bought a bunch of different types of coffees: dark roast, blonde roast, medium roast, different origins, and started learning about cold brewing. How to grind the coffee. And then how much time to cold brew it for. It's like making tea. Some people confuse cold brew with iced coffee. The main difference is you don't brew it like hot coffee and then pour it over ice. You steep it like tea. So I learned all about that, and then I tried originally Irish whiskey, kind of thinking I would create an Irish coffee. Um, and then I tried Canadian whiskeys, Japanese whiskeys, all sorts of different, American whiskeys, and then kind of landed on the flavor profile that it is today, which is a blend of bourbon and light whiskey. So it was definitely an iterative process. I also learned a lot about people's coffee preferences. I was at the time maybe a little bit more on the sweeter tooth side of the coffee loving spectrum, and really it was eye opening to see that people really loved, black coffee. When I would add a touch of cream or a touch of sugar, they would be like, "Oh no, you got to take that out. I want that bitterness of the black coffee. I want to really taste the roast." And that was kind of the inspiration for Original Black, the first SKU that's the flagship product.
Why did you land? I'm just kind of curious. I know this is very broad. I do not know alcohol very well. But why did you land on maybe bourbon over scotch or Irish whiskey?
So it's honestly about the balance. And what people love about cold brew is that it's smooth. And what people love about certain types of American whiskeys and bourbons is that they can have some oaky character to them, but they also have a smoothness to them as well. Scotch has more of like a peatiness and like a roasty kind of flavor to it that can kind of overpower the coffee. And my goal is to marry the flavors. And especially since we're not leaning on cream and sugar to kind of hide some of those, maybe less favorable flavor notes, we really had to just marry them perfectly in order to find that balance and allow for both flavors to kind of, reach the palate and be enjoyed by customers.
Got it. No, that makes sense in terms of why take it. I know that is maybe a rudimentary question to ask because there's so many different types of whiskeys out there, and so I know that these are like two broad cases.
More speaking more to like the op side of it, it's definitely easier working with, as an American-based company, working with local whiskey distilleries as well. That's definitely a part of it. I did end up like talking to some Irish whiskey distilleries and just the importation of it. It's already going to be a premium coffee when you're working with a premium product when you're working with coffee rather than like, carbonated water, seltzers, that sort of thing. And then kind of working with foreign spirits kind of would make it even more, pricey from a COG standpoint.
If you did, this is a again rudimentary question. If you did, for example, land on Irish whiskey or on a Scotch, do they actually can you actually get this produced in the U.S. or can you actually not get this produced or is it just really hard to actually get this produced in the U.S.?
Yeah, so it is denomination protected. Scotch has to come from Scotland, Irish whiskey has to come from
Okay, it does.
Ireland.
Okay,
But
okay. The same type of like flavor profile per se.
yeah, well, so that's definitely something where you can get kind of nerdy about whiskey and discuss, the main differences there. It's really all comes down to the grain that you use, the way that you age the product. Prosecco and champagne, you might find some that are very, very similar, and you might find some that are very, very, different. And it can be like that with whiskey as well, where there's a little bit of an overlap with flavor profiles, but there's definitely a culture and a style that tends to put them, in different kind of camps in terms of how they typically taste and what people, associate that, whiskey tasting like.
Yeah, I was kind of curious because of course champagne only can be grown in Champagne, but of course um, uh, uh, other places parts of the world can produce sparkling wine that can taste very very similar to champagne. So just kind of curious if if people actually or some distilleries actually do that with Irish whiskey and Scotch over here.
Yeah, you can rectify it. You could rectify it here. I could import it and blend it. You'd be able to say it's using Irish whiskey, but it wouldn't be an Irish whiskey
Yeah, but that's
product.
tough.
Yeah.
But you couldn't actually. That's the key. So you could maybe use you could find maybe similar flavor profiles, but at the same time you wouldn't be able to even market that it's actually Irish whiskey.
You could say made with
Cool.
Irish whiskey, but it wouldn't be like,
Made with.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
When you realize, okay, we're gonna have a bourbon base and then also use cold brew coffee and how did you land on? Well, how did you first approach and talk to distilleries? Because and how did you maybe land on the right one to actually produce the bourbon?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of CPG entrepreneurs, I had my benchtop, formula, the formula that I love, that I felt comfortable with. But when it came time to taking it to the next level, I did work with, people in the industry that had a lot more connections than I did at the time, and it's a little bit of a trade secret, so I won't say exactly who we ended up working with, but we we did find a great distillery that produces a stable quantity every year of the type of whiskeys that we wanted to use that mimicked like very well what I had kind of come up with in the kitchen, more of like a commercial grade version.
How then did you also figure out then, or when you graduated from a commercial kitchen, when did that make sense?
Some industries in food and bev are you can bootstrap them. Alcohol is, for better and for worse, not one of those. You need pretty sizable minimum order quantities. So I raised a friends and family round while I was getting my MBA at UT Austin, which really kind of kick-started the process of approaching a launch. So that was for me what needed to happen beforehand. But I talked with a bunch of different co-packers, found some that I liked, found some that I didn't like, went to the facilities, and then here we are today with, our current route to market, which is great.
Well, so let's talk about like your current route to market when you were just starting out. What was, I guess, your first sales channel? Since of course alcohol, it's very very tricky or very very difficult to sell online, or impossible depending on which category of alcohol that you're actually in. How did you maybe run some tests, make sure that it was you landed on the right flavor profile that you wanted and it tasted great, and as well as kind of like your first distribution channel?
Yeah, so I guess taking that question like each part at a time, from a taste standpoint, I really felt comfortable once I would hear, mostly consensus around that they really enjoyed the flavor. If I heard that they liked black coffee and the original black formula, they would say is right where they would expect it. That was kind of when I knew it was good. I heard some people saying maybe, a little stronger on the coffee or maybe a little stronger on the whiskey. But when I kind of had like a bell curve kind of converging on this is the right product, that's when I knew I had it from that standpoint. From like a product market fit, I did go out into Austin, all around town, talking with bar owners, liquor store owners, getting like letters of intent, basically, like LOIs to be like, hey, once this is made, would you sell it? And we got about 20 of those pretty quickly. So that was a good way to kind of validate it from just a business model standpoint. And then, as you kind of touched on the complexities, you have to sell a product like mine through alcohol distributors. So the next big, hurdle to get through was talking with all sorts of distributors in Texas to see who would make a good partner for me, and eventually landed on Republic National Distributing Company to kind of get our start.
How did you position yourselves in order to get into On Republic? Was it, hey, there's interest and we have LOIs here from bars and on prem, and then and so this is a product that where there is some demand on in the B2B lens, or also in retail. Is that kind of how you position it?
That is traditionally how it would be done. Yeah, you would really try to pitch them on. They want to see that you're going to be supporting the launch on your end, right? They're going to be helping you with the sales, but you're going to still need to be selling yourself. They're going to, maybe share some of the costs on marketing, but at the same time, they want to know that you're going to be investing in social media and email marketing and events and things like that. So you kind of have to sell them on your value proposition and the fact that you're, in my case, a portfolio enhancer. There's not many, if any, products similar to ours in their current portfolio, so we don't detract from anything that they're already doing. That's kind of the pitch that you make to them. Republic, I will say, we started off in their kind of on-demand program. Their previously was called LibDib. It's kind of more of like a self-distribution model. It's a great way to get started, but you definitely, as a brand, will want to eventually graduate out into a bigger program of theirs that will give you more support from a trade marketing, from a sales, from like a fulfillment minimum order quantity type of standpoint.
On demand self distribution. Can you run us through that model a little bit? Is that more like selling on consignment, or What's that kind of
Yeah,
like?
I'll be honest, it's not necessarily the most favorable, but it is a good way to get your foot in the door. And if you're really willing to really hustle and knock on doors yourself, it can definitely work. So basically, the way it works is we'll go out and we'll sell the products. Let's say in our case, we're in Total Wine and More, and Total Wine and More wants to bring in, 20 cases of our product across their 5 Austin locations, for example. We would, let that order would either be submitted by Total Wine and More, or we would put in a digital request to our distributor. They would then put in an order to receive product if they were running low on stock, type of thing. As you kind of build up your recurring business, they would have more product on hand to allow for the shipping to come, less often. In the beginning, though, I'll be honest, they're ordering like 5 cases. They kind of want to see you prove it first. It's a little bit of it's a
Makes
tough
sense.
road to, yeah, but from their perspective, you got to understand. They're like, we see dozens of different brands, prove it to us, kind of thing. And once you prove yourself, things start to just kind of move into place.
And so on demand self distribution, it's also what I'm gathering as well is that the distributor doesn't necessarily push your product into new stores on your behalf. It's more so you're pushing product into stores, getting the stores, and then your distributor actually goes and obviously fulfills those orders and kind of takes it from there in terms of everything.
You nailed it, exactly. So really, you're not getting the support in terms of them selling it. You're not even really getting their support in terms of reselling it in. So it's tough. It can be tough for young brands that don't have the footprint to really get a leg up in the industry. But it's one of those things where there's a lot of consolidation in this industry. It can be tough for brands. So the power really does currently sit with distributors, and you really just have to build that mind share for them and just be open-minded as an entrepreneur and say, how, okay, this is the system for better and for worse. How am I going to succeed despite, some of these challenges I have to overcome?
Since you are a new product, right? In that it's kind of an opportunity for it's not like a cannibalization for the distributor to actually take on your product since it is quite new. In terms of velocities and you all selling through, what does that look like since this is a fairly new category? And what do you benchmark that towards, like other categories you might benchmark that towards since there aren't many products in your category?
It's a great question. Something that I have an ongoing discussion with retailers about is when you compare us to a White Claw or a Modelo or a High Noon, we're not doing those same kind of volumes. We're ways away from that. But at the same time, I encourage them, and of course, I have a bias, but I encourage them to say, what's your average order, volume and like average order value, and how does cold brews influence that? And what I found is that we're increasing our average order volume because we aren't a direct competitor. Where people buy cold brews, they have one or two of them, and then they'll switch to their favorite beer or seltzer, or they'll buy a 4-pack for the foursome, kind of golfing, that kind of thing. That's kind of our positioning, is we're a complementary product, not a direct competitor, because I love coffee as much as anybody, but I don't have more than 2 3 cups a day, and that's kind of how cold brews is as well, because we use real ingredients.
That makes sense from a velocity standpoint. At what point, from a velocity standpoint, then the retailers kind of trusted you that, hey, this is actually maybe a real trend, or there's something here that we actually want to keep you on shelf, and that we kind of believe in this product? What was that threshold?
It really does depend. An account like Total Wine, they'll have higher thresholds. They'll want to see multiple cases moving per month, whereas some of these mom and pop liquor stores, they're not as much like in tune with that, and they're not as quick to discontinue your product as long as they see that you're coming around, you're checking in on the product, they see that you're doing point of purchase, point of sale marketing to try and get it off the shelf. So those numbers really do vary. Sorry, I can't give you like a exact metric. We definitely are looking for, these big box stores to do a lot more volume in the long run, than kind of these smaller ones. And then on premise, it's really, you can't really gauge it, because if you're not on the menu, right? If you're just sitting behind the bar, that's not going to move the same as if it's on the menu, right? It's a little bit of a pay to play game in the on premise. So some of these bars will give you a little bit of leeway to say, all right, you're not necessarily moving really well right now, but we also don't have you on the menu. So how about we try this, or we put you on the brunch menu, or we do a special, or this, that, or whatever. Do a bucket program, etc.
Totally. And how much is in a case? Is that 12?
A case is 6 4-packs, so 24 cans for us.
24 cans. Okay, cool. Got it. On the on-prem side, even on the menu, how do you even position yourself in terms of the menu? Is it bold move beverage? Because there is, I'd imagine, some education that you need to kind of instill, and of course, you don't actually get that much space on a menu, I'd imagine, right? Like you see like a Coke, you see whatever, what have you. So how do you also like talk to bars, talk to restaurants to make sure that the customer is properly educated about this option, bold move for a drink?
No, it's a great question. So for us, I don't know if people are going to be able to see the feed, or if they're just going to hear, but on our can, we have the hierarchy such that we have our logo at the top, but the feature is the cold brew's name in the middle. We're a new brand, and we understand that. Once you become Bud Light, you put Bud Light huge on there. You don't put beer, right? So for us,
everyone knows it's a beer, right?
Yeah, everybody knows it's a beer. Whereas for us, we're trying to kind of champion the cold brews trademark right now. Eventually people will know, what Bold Move Beverages stands for a little bit more. A brand that creates bold beverages for bold people that want to energize and socialize. But currently, it's all about kind of building up that name. So we definitely want cold brews to be what's on the menu more so than our brand name. And when people interact with novel products, they'll take a closer look at it and do a little bit of education themselves. We feature very prominently on our packaging coffee, whiskey, vanilla to really kind of let them know what it is. But it's definitely something that I'm still learning about, to be completely frank, of the best way to educate customers on a novel product like ours. When I'm doing samplings, I'll tell them it's like an Irish coffee, or it's like an espresso martini, but take out the vodka, add the whiskey, and don't add sugar, type of thing. So we're still learning, but it's something that people, if you do have a decent amount of space on the menu, you can explain it well. You say cold brews made with coffee, whiskey, and vanilla.
How do you think as well the balance and act between on-prem and of course retail, and maybe driving sales? I mean, we can also talk about socials as well, as well too. But I guess overall marketing in terms of balancing to actually drive people from maybe on-prem to actually purchase in retail, and or vice versa, that you're available at these bars or whatever. How do you kind of cross promote your products just so that people know where to actually find you?
No, it's a great question. So canned products, like if you talk to distributors, they'll say you got to really focus on the off-premise. Like that's where we do our volumes. Most canned products, they'll sell 90% retail, maybe 10% if they're lucky in the on-premise. Our product, what we're really trying to do though, is become a substitute for speed of service places for an espresso martini and Irish coffee that can be a hassle for bartenders to make. It's one of the most common complaints we hear is that bartenders, hate to make espresso martinis because they just take so much longer. There's so much prep that you need to do at the beginning of the shift. You got to do cleanup at the end of the shift. So that's kind of where we fit in. We're targeting more of an 80-20 split. And from a marketing positioning standpoint, we're really going after those daytime use cases that, where you want a coffee, but you also want a social drink with friends. So sports bars, brunch restaurants, golf courses, that's where we really are targeting, and we're very specific about that in our on-premise strategy. But it's definitely still evolving every day.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I was kind of wondering too where you all fell into how in terms of time of day. Is it the late night? Because you mentioned like the espresso martini. I think of that as more of a late night drink, or is it more of like a mimosa, where it's like a brunch type drink. So because I'd imagine that's also kind of tough, because it almost could be suitable, because this is coffee, typically a morning drink, and then of course alcohol typically an afternoon evening drink. That must be, maybe, is that Is that kind of complex in terms of figuring out when actually people would actually would actually try to would actually have your product, because it actually could be pretty wide ranging.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, it could be a substitute for a Red Bull vodka, an espresso martini, an Irish coffee late at night, right? But really, we feel that the white space that's, from a strategy standpoint that needs to be disrupted is those daytime use cases. So we trademarked cold brews. Our, dream would be to have it standing alongside the mimosa and the Bloody Mary as like a staple brunch time drink for the coffee lovers. Because I don't know about you, but when I would, go brunching with friends, I'd have a water in front of me, a coffee in front of me, and then a mimosa in front of me if I wanted to have a drink. I'd have all these drinks in front of me, and really, I just really wanted a coffee, and I did want to drink with friends, but I didn't necessarily want something so sugary like a mimosa. Or I didn't want a Bloody Mary with a chicken wing hanging out of it, or a celery stick hanging out of it. It wasn't really what I wanted. I just wanted a good drink that didn't clash with what I was eating and kind of like didn't give me a energy crash like a mimosa would. But I mean, I guess to answer your question more fully, I mean, as a small brand, you got to be really targeted. We would love to be in all those use cases and all the venues, but you got to really pick your your target market, your go to market, audience that you really can become, you know, you can have loyal customer and recurring business from. So that's kind of how we're going about it. We have talked to concert venues where we think, people are asking for Red Bull vodkas and they do offer it, or they don't offer it. They'll just offer, just a Red Bull, or just a, vodka soda. And that's kind of where we can fit in as well. But yeah, we're picking our spots as a brand to kind of just get our name associated with the use cases we're going after.
Totally, and that is quite complex, right? Because at the same time, you're an emerging brand. You only have a limited amount of resources, and it's hard to be known as one for one thing. Once you can be known for one thing, if people like that thing, then amazing, right? But if you're known for multiple things, and there's multiple use cases that people could try it, that I'd imagine is also a challenge in terms of, okay, how do we actually maybe present what is the right setting to actually do the photography and marketing for your brand as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the story of Athletic Brewing is a good example of how, he started off going to races and really evangelizing his product around people that were, you know, wanting to have a beer, but were also trying to be health conscious. And it was really just like a drink for runners in the beginning, and then eventually it grew into one of the leading, if not the leading, zero alc beers. So it's interesting that our brands kind of have to play that game of, of course their ambitions are grand, right? We all want to be a household name, but there's a lot of steps that happen in between getting your product on shelves and that. So it's fun, but it's also that's honestly what I love about being an entrepreneur is it's like solving a puzzle, and you just have to make sure that you grow, but you grow the right way, and you optimize your capital, and you take into account the ever changing customer preferences that are out there.
Speaking about growth, and that's a great example with Let It Brew. I mean, I think about when I did a Tough Mudder, and right afterwards, you kind of
The
they
Dos
give you
Equis they give you or whatever.
a big yeah, exactly, a big glass of beer, and it would have been great to have an athletic brew after that as another option. So totally get it. And that's real. I didn't actually know that was their kind of entry point to the market. So that's super cool. How well, speaking of growth, how do you also think about finance? I know you mentioned that you raised like a friendly round, but you know, obviously what's really tough, especially alcohol, which I mean, pretty much it's all B2B, right? Going to retail, and you having to managing net 60, net 90 terms. How do you think about managing those working capital needs that can be that can put a huge strain when it comes to your cash flow and making sure that you actually don't run out of money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough thing in the beginning when you don't kind of have an established name. Your credit isn't really established. These vendors are like, well, all right, pay us up front because we don't know you yet, but down the line we'll give you credit terms. It's a tough act to play when you're capitalizing your business. That's something I think entrepreneurs don't realize is they think, oh, I'm going to just invest in sales and marketing. No, a good chunk of your early invested capital is going to go into inventory. That is, there's unavoidable. So for me, that's, we kind of try and balance that line of making sure we do have, money in the war chest to invest into growth efforts, but also recognizing that and also making sure at our stage that our margins are okay. So we have to do a decent sized, production run as well. You can't just do just in time when you're not producing in house. So it's definitely a tough balancing act. I would just say you just have to have financial models that you've created and get great relationships with, people that do credit line extensions, purchase order financing that are your investors, your backers, whether that's friends and family, whether you're venture backed, it doesn't really matter. We're all approaching it from a different place, from a different position of capital, and you just kind of got to work with what you got to make sure that you're getting the metrics and you're hitting the milestones that you need to get to the next market, the next capital round, the next SKU, the next distributor, et cetera, whatever that goal is.
How do you think about growth overall? Because and when you get into stores, phenomenal. Kind of like the work begins there, right? Because now you have to make sure that they actually want you back and making sure that your velocities are kind of increasing. And what can happen is you might expand maybe too quickly and you might get into way too many stores and then and then you have like an oh crap moment where on all these stores maybe our velocities are not doing as well. We thought this would just sell like hotcakes and it just isn't, which nothing really sells like hotcakes. But because they are delicious. But so how do you think about like expanding into new stores, and what that kind of and your projections when it comes to the future of where you want to be when it comes to accounts versus as well as balancing as well as making sure that those velocities in your current stores and also when you expand you're still successful and that those retailers still want you back.
No, that's a great question. I can tell you from, there's the ideal path and then there's the path that I took. Sometimes as a brand, as an entrepreneur, you just try to survive to fight another day. So as a brand, what you should do, what everybody recommends is work with accounts that perfectly align with your use cases where find the when and the where your product makes sense and sell there. If you have a premium product, maybe you shouldn't sell in the working class neighborhood where they wouldn't want to spend, 17.99 on a 4 pack. You know what I mean? That's not going to be your audience. You want to be targeted with your retailers, but you also, as a brand, you need to show sales in the beginning, right? People want to see the growth. So in my case, I really wanted to. I had an initial run, and I wanted to sell it out as quickly as possible and show that this product can be sold. But I've learned from that it's worse in the long run to do that. You're not gonna sell the way you want to. The velocities are really the metric that really matter. So I've tried to be a lot more targeted with that, and with that in mind, you just gotta, of course, market it well, support the accounts where your product's in, tell your customers where it is, build demand, align set the sell in with the sell through. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. I'm still very much an early brand and trying to optimize that strategy. I know what we want to do in the long run, what we're currently planning to do to just continue to iterate and get better. But sometimes, the truth is there's a lot of chicken or the egg problems as an entrepreneur that you overcome. And you're like, well, I probably shouldn't spend $2,000 on this photo shoot to get really nice collateral, but I really want to have nice collateral on my pitch deck to then sell, the vision of the brand, and this will help. And you kind of play that game as an entrepreneur. I found that to be both fun and tough. It can be tough. It's not ideal, but it's just the reality of the situation is that we all kind of play that game to some extent.
Yeah, I did. So I'd imagine it's just really hard to kind of know. And once you kind of get offered that account, it's all right. Let's because obviously the goal is to
Of
is to
course.
increase
Yeah, you want
accounts.
them to
So it's
do
kind of it's
well,
kind of let's
but at the end of the day, you're you can only do so much as a young brand. You don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I always try to avoid that. I always say, look, if you're unsure about our product, like let us do a sampling for you to at least guarantee, like, you'll see me interacting with customers, you'll see how they react with it. And that I've been, very, very adamant about in the beginning. It's not necessarily the most scalable thing, but you just want to promise, you want to deliver on your promises to retailers and put your best foot forward so that, in our case, we launch a new SKU, we can go back and say, hey, remember the original black product? Now we got our vanilla oat SKU coming out. Do you want to bring that product in as well? And you're a lot more likely to get yeses if you've bought into kind of supporting them.
Why is now the right time to launch another SKU, and why did you land on vanilla oat?
Yeah, so very early on, I had formulated this product. So when I was testing it with customers, as I kind of touched on, I learned a lot of black coffee lovers wanted the original black, but I also learned a lot of people were like, oh, load it up with cream, add some sugar. Like I want a latte experience. I want that morning cup of joy. So that was always on my radar. They don't really cannibalize each other. It's a complementary product to the portfolio. And I think it just makes a ton of sense to have both those products side by side on the shelf. In terms of the timing, this part of the year is the biggest time of the year for canned products. 4th of July is incredibly busy, but then also leading into October, November, December, that's when the spirits industry does 60 or 50% of their revenue just in those 3 months. So the end of the year is also a prime time to introduce new products and show some good sales right off the jump as well. So for us, we've kind of, you know, really gotten some great feedback on the original black, but we want to continue to show growth, enhance our portfolio, continue to expand our presence on the shelf, and just give our customers the product that they've been asking for. Because our original black product is a still product and non-carbonated, a lot of people have already been adding oat milk and half and other ingredients and mixing it up in a cocktail shaker. And as a ready to drink, canned cocktail, you want it to be as convenient as possible. The vanilla oat will just be ready to go for people that take their coffee that way.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I've also found too with oat, because I drink oat cappuccinos, ice almond lattes, but oat just has that kind of thickness too. That's really great.
Viscosity, the mouthfeel that you kind of want as well. I love almond milk as well, but sometimes I find that it separates, or it just the look of it doesn't quite match up. And then there's obviously the allergen aspect as well, right? Of course, people, that's risky as well. So yeah, we just found that a lot of people love oat milk because it has like a natural kind of creaminess and earthiness to it that blends well with coffee.
About manufacturing, and as well as about ingredient choices, what has been the hardest ingredient for you to source or to work with?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say whiskey originally was the hardest, and sometimes, we'll hear, oh, stock's running a little bit low, so it makes us as a brand a little bit weary. I would say with all ingredients, and advice to all entrepreneurs is have multiple suppliers in place. Of course, you want to vet them for quality, all of them, but supply chains can be volatile, and always have ideas in place on if this were to happen, what would you do? So in our case, it's been whiskey. Our other ingredient suppliers, we've never really had any kind of hiccups. Coffee is a commoditized product for the most part. We work with a supplier that blends our coffee, so we don't rely on like a single origin type of coffee. We have a very consistent supply of it. But yeah, in our case, it's the whiskey that we sometimes worry about, and but it's at the moment we haven't actually had to like delay production runs or switch suppliers at any point.
What would you value more? $100 of COGS, $100 of inventory, or $100 cash?
$100 of COGS, because what that turns into, yeah, what that turns into is better, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can
because if
sell
you can,
products for, yeah.
you can sell product and turn that into cash, and if you have margin, then it's worth more than cash. I know it's not that easy. I know that there's a lot of complexities. I know that is really hard to do what you do and to start a CP and start a brand, but that's of course, but of course that's the name of the game. Buy an inventory, and also and
The cash
selling it.
cycle.
Exactly, the cash cycle. Jacob, this was so much fun chatting with you. Thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it.
And there you have it. It was a pleasure chatting with Jacob. Jacob, thanks again for so much for coming on the podcast. If you're enjoying the show and you want to also connect with other SMB owners or operators, check out our events at manufacturer.com/events. We throw events all over the US and Canada in order to help bring the SMB community together and inventory business operators together. Thank you.